Welcome to today's lesson on equivalent fractions and decimals. Today we're going to be investigating how to turn a fraction into a decimal. Now remember, fractions and decimals both represent parts of a whole. They're just written in different ways. Alright, let's begin. Let's begin today's lesson by looking at the block to the left. This is called a 100s block. It has 100 squares that make up this block. Of the 100 squares, we have 10, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25 squares shaded in. So as a fraction, we would say that we have 25 out of 100 squares shaded in. Now again, the purpose of a fraction is to show part of a whole. So we're showing this part, 25, out of one whole, which is 100 squares. So the purpose of our lesson today is to see how we can change a fraction into a decimal. So how would you write this diagram as a decimal? Well, how would you say this decimal amount? Since we're ending in the hundredths place, we would say this as 25 hundredths. Wait a second, that sounds familiar. Let's look at this fraction. We say this fraction as 25 hundredths. We say this decimal as 25 hundredths. Well, 25 hundredths written as a fraction or as a decimal have equal amounts. So this decimal amount represents this picture right here, 25 out of 100 squares. This fraction, 25 out of 100, also represents the same amount. The only difference is that we're writing it in different ways. Let's go ahead and learn how to turn a fraction into a decimal. We are going to start today by turning 1/4 from a fraction into a decimal. Now the fraction symbol also means division. So we're taking one whole and we're dividing it into 4 parts, which is what the denominator represents. So to turn a fraction into a decimal, we're going to be using division. So let's set up our division here, and we're going to be dividing our numerator by our denominator. So 4 can't go into 1, so we're going to put a 0 as a placeholder, and now we're going to put in our decimal right to the right of this place value. So 4 can't go into 1, so we're going to put a 0 in the next place value over. 4 can go into 10 2 times. 4 times 2 equals 8. When we subtract down, that gives us with a remainder of 2. So now I'm going to the next place value over. 4 can go into 20 5 times. 4 times 5 gives us a value of 20. And there we go, we have zeroed out. So we now know that 1/4 has an equivalent value in decimals to 25 hundredths. Let's go ahead and let's check our work, changing this decimal back into a fraction. So we know 25 hundredths written as a decimal can also be written as 25 hundredths as a fraction, and we saw that on the previous screen with our block, our 100ths block. So let's go ahead and let's simplify 25 hundredths and see if we can simplify it back into 1/4. All right, if we divide 25 by 25 and we divide 100 by 25, 25 divided by 25 gives us a numerator of 1, and 100 divided by 25 gives us a denominator of 4. So we successfully changed this decimal into a fraction, and we simplified it to show that it is indeed the same amount. 1/4 is the same amount or equivalent to 25 hundredths written as a decimal. Let's go ahead and let's go through some practice problems together. This would be a great time to pause your screen and try to work through these on your own. Then you can press play to check your work. Alright, let's go ahead and start with 3/4. To turn 3/4 into a decimal, we need to divide our numerator by our denominator. Now 4 can't go into 3, so we're going to put a 0 as a placeholder, and you have to remember to put that decimal there. 4 can go into 30 7 times. 4 times 7 equals 28, and if we subtract down, that gives us a remainder of 2. So now we need to go over one more place value. I'm going to drop down my 0. 4 can go into 20 5 times. 4 times 5 gives me 20, and I am all zeroed out. So I know that 3/4 written as a fraction is equivalent to 75/100 written as a decimal. All right, are you ready for your next practice problem? 1/2. Again, we know that we are dividing our numerator by our denominator. 2 cannot go into 1, so we're going to put a 0 and remember that decimal. And now we're going to move to the next place value over. 2 can go into 10 5 times. 5 times 2 equals 10. And look at that, we are already zeroed out. That was pretty quick. So we know that 1/2 written as a fraction is equivalent to 5/10 written as a decimal. Let's go ahead and review what you've learned in today's lesson. In order to change a fraction into a decimal, you need to divide your numerator by your denominator. So if we want to change 1/5 from a fraction into a decimal, we divide our numerator into fifths by our denominator. 5 cannot go into 1, so you have to put a 0 as a placeholder. And make sure you put your decimal next to that placeholder. 5 can go into 10 2 times. 5 times 2 is 10. And then you can go ahead and 0 out. So we know that 1/5 is equivalent to 2/10 written as a decimal.